Hi, I'm James McGuire, and today we're talking about all things data catalog. We'll look at exactly what a data catalog does, and we'll talk about some tips and best practices for optimizing a data catalog. To discuss that, I'm joined by someone who knows about as much about data catalogs as anyone in the world, probably. With me today is Satyen Sangani, CEO of Alation. Satyen, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, James, it's great to see you again.
Absolutely. And I think we met, might have been 2016, 2017. We never did figure that out, but it's been a few, it might have been even before that.
Yeah, but it was a great dinner, and you were the best, one of the best things coming out of that dinner. So,
Great. So speaking of best things, there's an amazing piece of news that just broke. Elation raised $110 million in Series D funding. The last time I checked, $110 million is a pretty serious amount of money. I sat down with a calculator and I figured it out. It took me a while, but I figured out that's 1/10 of $1 billion. So it's just a lot of money, Sachin, and congratulations.
yeah, it's weird to think that somebody would trust an organization led by me with that kind of money. But thankfully, there's lots of smart people who, you know, make us look good, and so
Yes,
yeah, no, it is an incredible amount of money. I mean, it is.
right.
And kind of inconceivable in some ways because when we started 9 years ago, I mean, $110 million was a great exit,
Right, right.
right? And what's even crazier is that we're likely to spend it. I mean,
Yeah.
we're likely to spend it, and we're going to spend it. We're going to spend it aggressively because unlike 9 years ago, I think the market momentum around data broadly, but what we do specifically is just incredible, and the opportunity is just amazing.
It is, and I was talking about this beforehand that I'm amazed looking at the IT sector in that the only thing that anyone wants to talk about these days is data. I mean, cloud used to be hot and is still hot, and we talk about other things, edge computing, et cetera, which is a data story itself. But every vendor, every provider, their story, no matter what they sell, their story is data, believe it or not.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's because the innovation in the stack used to be around business process optimization and defining the business processes and defining the engagement processes and allowing one step to move to the other. But the world of computing has broadly, and B2B software has broadly graduated past that. And so now every transactional experience, every process experience has to be informed by what the next best decision is.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you can do that is with data. And so everything has to be intelligent, everything has to be guided, everything has to be prescient based upon the needs of the consumer or the actor at any given time. And so data powers all those experiences. So, all of the investment on the margin now is going to data, which is just a fabulous place to be, because I mean, that means that, people like us who are trying to enable lots of people with data, are obviously selling tools, during what is way more than a gold rush, because there's actually gold to be found.
Right.
In our
Yes.
case. So it's cool.
I want to get back to the 110 million because I don't think we should leave that too far behind. I like to think about that number. It's a lovely number. But let's get a little 101-ish if we can, because I know, companies have a database, they have a data warehouse, they might have a data lake, but why do they need a data catalog? And of course, the term sounds self-explanatory in the face of it. It must be a catalog that holds their data. But what exactly does a data catalog do, if that's not too dumb a question? And why do we need one?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, you would think that in a world where there's so much data, everybody would just understand the data that they have. I mean, you have lots of emails, you probably broadly know where your emails are.
Right.
But the reality is there's so much of it that you forget. And if you think about those three words, right, those three words actually have different meanings. So database, there are different types of databases, but often they fuel and are the basis for transactional systems. And then you've got sort of your data lake, which takes all of the sort of core transactional data from those systems and puts them into a single place for storage and analysis. And then to your point, you've got this data warehouse. And in today's world, the warehouse is a place where all that information is not just stored, but also structured so that you can commonly ask questions in a repeatable, consistent way and process the data in a repeatable, consistent way. And so those are three different levels of processing, almost like you've got sort of iron ore, and then you've got the base metal, and then you've got a finished product. That's essentially, how to think about those three things. Now, the reality is that in each of those things, you've got, a company like Pfizer or like, Goldman Sachs, like these are customers that have hundreds of thousands of databases, and they've got scores of data lakes, and they've got tons of data warehouses and data marts. And so in a world where they've got tens of thousands of employees, they don't even know what data they have, what data their colleagues are working on, what data is in a warehouse, what data is in a database, where they can get it, how they can get access to it. And then even when they find it inside of a database, there's this question of what does that data even mean? Right. And so, we can get into like what that looks like, but then there's this question of like, oh, well, customer ID number 3712512, actually that means IBM. And how do I decode that? And how do I figure that out? Because that's not in English. And so, these problems of both discovering data and understanding data are just getting more and more and more and more complicated. And in a world where data is sort of the power that runs the world, it is impossible to get by without something to help you navigate that landscape.
So the data catalog really is a pretty meta thing then. It's almost like the navigational tool that you need for all your data entries, data warehouse, data lake. Where is it all? If without the data catalog, in theory, I would be lost.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, there's so many analogies. Like the catalog analogy obviously is Yelp or Amazon or LinkedIn, but you could even use an analogy like Yahoo Maps, right? Or Google Maps, right? Like, I mean, just how do I get from point A to point B? Or even extending that farther, like Waze. Well, I want to go use this data, but it's got data that's got PII. I need to comply with GDPR. Can I use this data? And so having this catalog really is the entry point for anybody who wants to understand information and analyze stuff.
So I'm sure that there are plenty of data catalog users out there who are like encountering some challenges, encountering some headaches. I mean, what are some common challenges involved? And it seems like one of the first problems would be, how do we get someone or a team or a series of teams to actually catalog our data, given that we have so many pools and repositories of data? Someone has to go through and actually create the data catalog. True or false?
Yeah, so I think this that's great. So there's this idea of this catalog as a noun and catalog as a verb.
Okay.
Right? So catalog as a noun is the place that you go to find something, right? And then there's this question of like catalog as a verb. And it used to be the case that cataloging as a verb was done by an army of Accenture consultants or Deloitte consultants who would come in and perhaps charge you hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And the only reason you would ever do that, kind of like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, is because you would need to comply. Right? Yeah. Because there just wasn't enough people to just like document all of this information. I think we've turned catalog as a verb into something that machines do. And so we really helped the world sort of, kind of catalog or understand their data by taking ML-based approaches to crawling data sets, just like Google does, and then looking at the logs around how people using this stuff, just so we can understand like, hey, James looked up this data set. This data set, therefore, is probably pretty important because James really understands IT. And so this is a great data set for IT. And so being able to sort of understand that history by doing all of this machine learning allows people to document the information in a way that they would otherwise have to do manually, where every individual piece by piece would have to do this work, data set by data set, which is just impossible.
So data catalog is a process. It's both a noun and a process. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And we think of it, and it's something that I think people now understand that they need. But of course, what's happening today is that core capability, that core catalog is becoming the basis for which a whole bunch of traditional data management applications are now being delivered. So once you've cataloged your data, you can deliver better, descriptions of whether or not that data is high quality. You can understand whether or not that data has been loaded at the appropriate place and time, data observability. You can master your data better because you know which data you have. You can migrate the right data to the right cloud storage system because, again, you know what data you have. You can merge it with external and third-party data sets because, again, you know what data you have. And so all these things that used to be historical point tools and point capabilities are now being sort of built on top of this catalog as a platform for this broader category that we describe as data intelligence. And that to me is what's so exciting, because you can take all of this work that historically has been done really by like narrow audiences in IT and explode it so that now data management is an enterprise capability for any business person that wants to do anything with data. And that's the opportunity for Alation.
Yeah, all right. I definitely see the need for that, to be sure. So you mentioned ML. So ML and AI certainly play a role in doing the heavy lifting here. What is the role that, I mean, I guess humans could not do this, so it's partially done by ML and AI.
Yeah, I mean, just think about some of the, so I'll give a couple of examples just to give,
Please.
a sense of texture for what that feels like. So inside of enterprises, inside of databases, if you think about databases, the most, fundamental databases are relational databases, and there's just tables like you would have in Excel. And often what happens is that when people label those databases, the very column header, they'll say, oh, it's TXN underscore ID numbers underscore C. That's like a great column name.
Okay.
So we're not column name for a programmer, because a programmer, basically allows, they care about succinctness and being able to type really fast. But it's not really great for people who are consuming that information, because they don't know if TXN is transaction or trucks. Right. And they don't know if ID is identifier or something else. And so if you think about the myriad of literally billions of different column names inside of many companies, how do you label that stuff at scale? Well, if I know the TXN is transaction, I can go find that pattern as a machine and just explode that a billion times through. But I couldn't do that as a human being, because I'd never be able to just do the work manually well enough. And so machines can now do these things that otherwise would have been so hard for people to do today. And so that's what's exciting, because you can now take that, and now people, once they search for transaction, can find that information in the catalog.
Neat. So what is a common problem for those data catalog users out there? If they have a certain classic headache, what might be the classic headache or challenge of the data catalog user, and what might you recommend to say, hey, don't do that, try this? So
you won't be surprised that the first and most fundamental use case is just search and discovery. If I have a customer question or a question about my customers, where do I find the customer data? So that's generally the first thing that I think people want to know. And that seems like a trivial thing, but there are often many of our customers, 4,000 different data sets, or 10,000 different data sets, or 40,000 different data sets that speaks to a particular aspect of customer relationships or customers. And so, data discovery is one piece. Another aspect of it is what we define as data literacy. So once I've gotten this stuff, how do I get enough context to know whether it's the right thing to use? So within those 40 data sets that I might narrow down to, which one do I use? How do I know it's usable? And then the last piece of it is just trust. Like, how do I know actually how to use this, and what's the way to use this? So that's kind of the basic frame of what we do. And then the more fundamental business use cases, productivity and sort of self-service enablement is a big deal, because lots of jobs are becoming data jobs. Another use case for us is data governance, because people, to govern the data, need to understand where the data is. Ironically, lots of tools historically that would do data governance would actually be disconnected from the underlying data estate, which sounds really weird, but literally, like, you would have data governance glossaries built and workflows built where no underlying data systems were connected.
Strange. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Like, super strange. And of course, intractable and unmanageable. And then what you would find is things like cloud data migration, data privacy with GDPR. People are doing a lot of work in data exchange, moving data back and forth between organizations. So lots of interesting use cases are emerging as people are becoming more and more sophisticated with data.
Interesting. All right, so let's look to the future. Think about what is the data catalog of 2025 going to look like? And I guess that gets us back to the 110 million, which I can't stop thinking about. I assume you're going to obviously spend the 110 to help build that data catalog of 2025. So how are you going to spend the money, or what is the future of the data catalog?
Yeah, so we have been talking a lot about this idea of the data catalog as a platform for data intelligence. And I think this sort of platformization for us is just such a critical idea, because to get this catalog up and running, it's got to be super seamless, super easy to do, super easy to deploy. And today, that is not as true as it should be. Right, we've got 200 and over 250 enterprise customers, most of whom are global 2000s. We think that number should be 10x over the next 3 to 5 years. And to get to that point, You just have to make the process super easy. And so being in the cloud, making sure that you're ubiquitously connectable, making sure that you have, in the same way you've got self-driving cars, you've got self-driving connectors, that's a big part of the investment of building that platform capability out and making it totally seamless. A big application capability that we're investing in is data governance. We think that data governance today is just too hard, too cumbersome, too inscrutable, too impossible to set up, 3 years time to value. Nobody has that time. Most people are in and out of 2 jobs in that time.
Right.
And so, in our world, we think data governance is a first-class use case. And then the big part of building a platform is, of course, enabling an ecosystem. And so, we really believe with partnering with, great data quality vendors, great data privacy vendors, great cloud vendors like Snowflake, and certainly Salesforce, in order to be able to build this great ecosystem of partners who can both feed data in, but also take use cases out. And so that's what we're going to be working on for the next, few years. And it's an amazingly rich roadmap.
I can only imagine. It's going to be really neat to follow it. I hope we can speak again sometime. Satyen, thank you very much for sharing your expertise today.
Thanks, James. It's always great to see you.